Welcome, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning, welcome to our Remote Roadshow. We'll just hold on a few minutes while we have people joining the call.
During this time, while we're waiting for people to join, it could be a nice opportunity for you to share who you are and what charge you're representing, either in the chat or by vocal acclamation as well.
I'm John from St Mary's in Dunblane. Rosemary is also here. She'll be here in a minute. So you've got two of us this morning from Dunblane.
Hello, I'm Graham Henderson from St Adrian's in Gullen.
Carmen, I'm in the Brecon Diocese with 4 churches around Lawrence Kirk.
Hi, I'm Kath Davis, and this is Sue Dunnett. We're from St Margaret's in Aberlour.
Hello, Kath. I'm Jean MacDonald from
Hi, Jean. Right.
Hi there. I'm Mark Perkins. I'm sort of roughly connected to Rosyth Methodist, but I'm feeling a bit cheeky jumping onto this call. Adele's sent me the meeting a link, and I thought I'd come on board if that's okay. Then I'll stay. If not, you can kick me out.
Absolutely, you're so welcome.
Thank you.
I'm Donald Bruce. I live in Uig, as you can see, a view from my window, and I am the Diocesan Environmental Group Leader for Argyll and the Isles. And sorry, St Columba's Port. Sorry, I forgot to give the church.
Where's his snow?
I'll just jump in then. My name's Craig Herriot. I work for Flexel International. We manufacture infrared heating at Glenrothes in Scotland. I've been doing quite a lot of work with some of the churches, free surveys and free quotations. We're looking at infrared heating.
I'll go next. There's always this awkward silence and no one quite knows who's going to go next, so I'll just chip in. I'm Paul Williams. I'm the Director of Net Zero for the SEC. Hand over to somebody else.
I'll fill the space. My name's Ian Johnston. I'm the Net Zero Sustainability Officer. I cover Argyll and the Isles, and then Glasgow and Galloway. Looking forward to today.
Hello, Ian.
Nice to see you, Donald.
I'm Neil Rawlings, and I am the Carbon Projects and Data Officer for the as the Net Zero team, and I'm the one that usually bothers you for your energy footprint tools, and I look after the Edinburgh Diocese.
If you can see me through all my bundling up, my multiple layers here, I'm Jack Nevin. I'm the Net Zero Innovation Coordinator, and I'm the diocesan rep for the Diocese of Brecon and the Diocese of Aberdeen and Orkney.
I can go next. I'm Lauren Petherbridge, and I work for Christian Aid in the church engagement and community fundraising team. So it's a pleasure to be joining you this morning for the workshop.
Hi, I'm Val Cameron. I am Vice Convener of the Provincial Environment Group.
I'm John Hodges. I'm here with National Churches Trust. I'm the Cherish Project Manager, overseeing our projects in Scotland, Wales and North West England, and you'll hear a little bit more of my voice in a little while. So looking forward to that.
Hi all, my name's Jeff Stevenson. I'm a warden at St James the Less Episcopal Church down in Leith. Nice to be with you.
Good, well, welcome everybody. I'm Bethany Nelson and I'm also a member of the Net Zero team. I'm the Empowerment Coordinator and it's fantastic to have all of you on this call this morning. Just a little bit of Zoom etiquette to start with. We will generally be keeping people on mute, and if you forget to mute yourself, some of us might mute you, so please don't see that as us being rude, but simply to help the audio to work well for everybody. If you'd like to ask a question, please do put questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask a question if it feels like a good moment for that. There'll be lots of opportunities for people to share and ask questions throughout the call. We're also recording this call. Some people aren't able to make it and others might want to listen back at a later date. So the recording will go up on the Net Zero portal. So you're welcome to use that or to share it with others who you know weren't able to make the call today. Feel free to put your name and your church in the chat, any questions in the chat throughout the call, or just any comments or things that you would like to raise. Please do use that function. Just to give a little bit of background about this call today, we've been running Net Zero Roadshow events throughout the province. So far, we've run an event in each diocese, apart from Perth, and that event's happening at the end of January. Unfortunately, it was postponed because of a storm. But the roadshow events that we've run in person in each diocese have been a fantastic opportunity to gather people together, to share learning, to share experience, and importantly, to encourage one another within those local diocesan contexts. And this event today is a bit different. We're meeting online, not in person, but we wanted to have something that could increase our accessibility, particularly for people who aren't able to come to an in-person event. Perhaps they weren't able to manage a weekend, or maybe travel's complicated and tricky for them. So we hope that there might be people here today who weren't able to be at their diocesan event, perhaps people particularly from those more rural and island communities. And I know that there are people on this call today within those contexts. So we want to recognise that there's different challenges in the different geographical areas within Scotland as we embark on reaching net zero, thinking about sustainability, thinking about reducing our carbon footprint. There's so many challenges, aren't there, for communities, for churches, for individuals, for heritage buildings, and additional challenges, particularly in those rural and island communities. So we want to recognise the challenges, but also encourage one another that there are lots of solutions out there, lots of opportunities, and keep all of our striving within the context of our faith. So remembering that the reason that we are trying to reduce our carbon footprint is because of our call to care for God's good creation. We're glad that we've got Lauren here to share a bit more about climate justice later in the morning. And again, that will be a nice opportunity to reflect on our global brothers and sisters for whom climate change really is a matter of life or death. We're also excited to have John from the National Churches Trust, who's going to share with a really good experience on church buildings and the many challenges and opportunities that we've got. So you can see today is a little bit of a kind of snapshot into what our diocesan in-person events have been like. This is obviously a much more condensed version, but it will provide, hopefully, a platform for people to share and to hear about some of our experiences and experiences of other organisations, some of the opportunities available. Later on, Ian's going to share some case studies from around the province, and we all know that we learn best, don't we, when we hear stories of what other people are doing. So I hope that that can be a nice opportunity for each of us to have a voice and talk a bit about what's happening in our own local context. A little bit later on, we will have a screen break, and that can be an opportunity to keep discussing and keep chatting and keep asking questions, or feel free to just take a break, get a cup of tea. And equally, if you need to jump off the call at any point, then that's absolutely fine. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to John from the National Churches Trust, so we can hear from him. Thank you, John.
Thanks, everyone. Just while I get my screen shared with you, I woke up this morning and thought, how can I look a bit more like Neil? So I chose a shirt that looks very much like Neil's shirt today, just trying to fit in with everyone. But hopefully you can see my slides. I can see some nodding heads, that's great. I slightly lose how many people I can see when I put my slides on, but I can at least see Bethany nodding away, so yeah, so I feel encouraged. I'll tell you a little bit about me and a little bit about the National Churches Trust. First of all, so the National Churches Trust is a national charity. We are aiming to keep the UK's wonderful collection of church buildings well maintained, valued, and used. And we've got kind of three strands to how we want to see that happen. So we want to build up churches, and we do that. We make grants for repairs and maintenance, so churches can be in good condition, and we offer sort of wraparound support in terms of training and advice around church buildings. We want to see churches open up, so we're all about encouraging visitor and community use, because you know, what's the point of having these wonderful buildings if no one's going to get in and see them and appreciate them? And we also speak up on behalf of churches across the UK. So this year we've been campaigning hard around the Listed Place of Worship grant scheme. You might have seen some stories about that. We've also just released our National Churches Survey. So we surveyed over 3,500 churches across the UK. That's about 10% of churches across the nation. I've got some really interesting, both encouraging and challenging results about how churches view their buildings, about how they're used, and about kind of how optimistic they're feeling about the future. And then a little bit about me, where I fit in, what I am part of the Cherish project. So I'm the Cherish project manager, which means I support our team and kind of make sure we do all the things that we say we're going to do through our project. So Cherish is a 3-year project, and we started in 2023. We're running through to next year. And Cherish offers support for churches in Scotland, Wales, and North West England. How we do that, we've got dedicated support offices in each place, one in North West England, one in Wales, and actually 2 in Scotland, or 1.5 in Scotland. So you may meet my colleagues David and Anne-Marie at some point. They actually do live in Scotland. I'm joining you from sunny Stockport in Greater Manchester today. And alongside offering that sort of direct support for churches, so our support officers, they'll come and visit your church, they'll show up at events like this, they'll support your grant applications, they'll advise on other sources of funding, they might give you some hands-on advice around maintenance and planning your projects as well. But we also have a dedicated grants programme, so we can make grants for repairs and maintenance and project development. We can make grants up to £10,000 or as little as £500, and they're for projects costing up to £80,000. I'll talk a little bit more about our grants at the end when I've talked about the sort of things that we want to support in terms of good maintenance practice. We also do have some national grants programs as well. They are just like McDonald's, called medium and large. So there's more information about all of those grants programs on our website. And also through the project, we're offering training, support and advice with buildings. So we run a bunch of webinars, we've done some in-person training, we've done some in-person events. And Cherish is funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. So it's we've had just over £1.9 million to spend over 3 years. About half of that is our grants fund for churches in those 3 places. So we're very grateful to lottery players for making that possible. And so one of the things that we are really passionate about at the National Churches Trust is really good maintenance. We recognise that maintenance can mean different things to different people. But perhaps we could go to the Oxford English Dictionary to get a definition of maintenance, which is the process of preserving a condition or situation or the state of being preserved. So that's a helpful definition, preserving a condition or situation or the state of being preserved, because it really does sit alongside our charitable objectives of conservation, of preserving and caring for buildings. So today I'm not going to really touch on the sort of the large repair projects that we can fund, like your re-roofing or kind of major works, but we're talking about the day-to-day cleaning and maintaining, and kind of maybe some of the stuff in between, those small tasks that come up when you take care of your church building. You're helping to keep it in its current condition, which is hopefully a good condition, and certainly prevent it from getting any worse. So we're talking about keeping our buildings going, and that's really important when it comes to thinking about our buildings and net zero, because as you all know, like trying to heat a damp building is so much less efficient than trying to heat a dry building. So taking care of your gutters, your rainwater goods, your roof tiles, taking care of all of those things makes everything else much more efficient. It makes the building and the systems that you already have work much more efficiently, and there's obviously a time and a place for replacing those, but actually taking care of the fabric of your building now means that the time that you'll need to replace and repair those things hopefully gets pushed a little bit further into the future for a time and a place when it's appropriate. And there's 2 sorts of maintenance that we tend to think about. There's proactive or preventative maintenance. That's the sort of thing I'm going to be talking about today. Stuff that's carried out on a planned basis, helps to limit the deterioration of fabric, prevent the types of failure that would occur over time. But then there's also reactive maintenance, those minor repairs, so things like fixing a slipped slate, replacing some broken glass, and perhaps doing some temporary flash band lead work, usually following sort of bad weather or accidents. And then maintenance, differs a bit from repair. Repair work is carried out to put right things that have gone wrong, or maybe things that have gone on decay that's happened over a long time. Whereas maintenance is all about keeping things as they are and looking out for from the building and the condition that it is. So proactive maintenance, it will save you money. It's all about guardianship of the building. Actually, you can engage a community. I'll talk about team in a little while. It's sustainable. It helps achieve net zero goals, and it preserves your heritage of your building. William Morris famously said, "Stave off decay by daily care." So we can stop things getting much worse over time when we take those little jobs to be just as important as the big jobs. And you might you might sit in a team meeting and think that some of this feels like really unnecessary expense. You know, people might be saying, well, do the gutters really need clearing twice a year? You know, we had the drainage checked in 2012 and they were fine back then. You know, there's only one tree growing out of the tower. What harm can a couple of pigeons do? But taking care of those things in small doses kind of really breaks the big chunks down and makes it much more manageable. And having a proactive maintenance plan means a lot of it can be done by volunteers. Obviously, again, I'll talk about team in a little while and making sure things are safe for everyone, but you can achieve a lot by not spending much more than the cost of than a few cups of tea and a few packets of biscuits. And it's also a great way to engage your community. Like I said, you know, the general public is actually really willing to help out with historic churches, and it might be an opportunity for people in the community around your building to come and help out your church who wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable attending Sunday worship, but they might actually care enough to take care of the gutters or come and do some gardening in the churchyard, because you know your church might be a building that they've passed every day of their life for decades, and just because they don't want to come in on a Sunday doesn't mean they don't care about looking after that building and make sure it's there for the next generation. And then reactive maintenance, again, it's all about saving money. It's all about fixing problems when they're small. Again, it's thinking about caring for the building, promoting that guardianship of the building. Again, it can engage the community. It's sustainable. It's about helping achieve our net zero goals and preserving the heritage that we have. You know, small and patch repairs, they almost always have a much lower carbon footprint and can save loads of money. You know, the average cost increase of repairs work has been around 25% over recent years. So actually, if we get those repairs done as soon as we can avoid bigger costs in the long term, and actually we can avoid needing to make some of those repairs at all when we've got a good maintenance schedule. You know, and impact of issues often builds up over time. You know, if one slip slate might start letting a bit of water in, which then damages the woodwork, which then damages the plaster, which then can affect the AV system that you've just paid thousands of pounds for, and end up making the church colder. So actually, those little jobs, repairing slip slates, can massively save you loads of money down the line. You know, the famous phrase of stitch in time saves nine. And whether or not your building is listed or unlisted, every church building is chock full of history and heritage. It's full of people's stories, and every bit of damage is a little bit of that history and heritage lost. And I would say, you know, an old roof with some new slates in is much better than having to replace the whole roof, especially when we're thinking in terms of the cost, the embodied carbon, and the heritage we get to preserve. And maintenance is important now. It's always been important, but we are seeing much more impact of climate change. You know, we are seeing higher peak rainfall, not necessarily more rainfall across the year, but higher peak rainfall. So actually having those clear gutters, having those clear downpipes is more important than ever. Actually, you know, compared to decades gone past, we are seeing fewer people in church, which means there's less finance available. So making those cost-effective repairs now is really, really important in terms of stewarding the finance that we have. And you know, it does seem counter to culture. You know, the modern world doesn't tend to make do and mend very much anymore. We're very much in a throwaway culture, and throw it away and buy a new one, get rid of the old system, stick something new in. But the lifetime of our church buildings is often measured in centuries. You know, we shouldn't be needing to replace the roofs on our church buildings every 20 years. And so, you know, we know that repairs are a huge issue across the country. You know, south of the border, the Church of England's got a repair bill that probably stretches past £1 billion, and that repair bill won't come down unless we get proactive with our maintenance, with our daily care of our buildings in the short term. But it's not all doom and gloom. There's plenty you can do, and I'll go through some of these steps now. You know, using a checklist, keeping a log, regular maintenance, carrying out those minor repairs, and doing it together are some of the most helpful and important things you can do to bring those costs down and to manage this stuff in the long term. So the first thing I would say is have a plan, have a checklist. A friend of mine often says to me, "You're never stuck if you've got a plan." And so making a plan is probably the most important step in looking after your building. So we have this checklist available on our website. You can download. Don't be distracted by the fact it says Historic England. It can be used you know, regardless of your location in the UK and beyond. And this is just an example of one page of it. And I'll share the link for this at the end as well. And this is like a Word document, so you can fill in for your church. You can do it either on the computer or print it out. And you can see the first section, you know, is one of those sections that we have to think about a lot when it comes to maintenance, which is our roof. And so thinking about, you know, the roof areas generally, kind of what needs doing, who's going to do it, and how often it's going to be done. And then you can think about kind of the cost for that, when you're going to do it. And then when you're doing it, note down some of your observations as well, anything you need to do off the back of that. And then, you know, like any good spreadsheet, it's got a column for comments as well. And this, you know, the template that we've got covers all different parts of a church building and can be adapted to suit any type of building, really. And so having a plan means you can schedule this stuff in. It means you know what you need to do and when. It means nothing gets missed or left off. And the important thing about having a plan is, as well as once you've made it, is following it and keeping it up to date. So you know, keep it in a format that is going to work for you and your church community, whether that is printing it out and having it in a folder in the church office, or having it in a shared document format where different people can access it and make sure it's kept updated. And so yeah, make a plan and stick to it. The SBAB have also got a really brilliant faith and maintenance calendar that you can get from their website. It's also linked from our website as well. You can print that one out. It's got some nice pictures on it as well, if you're into that sort of thing. And I believe they're also planning to update that next year as well. So do look out for that. But having a plan, yeah, means you get to monitor the fabric of your building. It means things get regularly checked. It helps organise time. You can plan out the costs across the year. A record of your notes and observations are kept, and means you can incorporate this stuff into your annual budget. You know when costs are going to come up, and then will help you spot any of this stuff in advance, so you can address it as and when needed. So first and most important thing when it comes to maintenance is make a plan. The second most important thing is have a team to do it together. Don't feel like you have to go this alone. Being part of a team, you know, it is good for everyone. It means we get help with the tasks. It means the duties are shared. It's not all on one person. It gives people the opportunity to get involved. Like I said, it can engage your local community. People that, like I said, wouldn't want to come on a Sunday and join in worship, but actually might care about the building and would want the opportunity to help some way. And actually having a team to do this means there's a support network. So there's cover when people are unavailable. You know, people do get ill, they go on holiday, they move house, they suddenly become unavailable. So future planning and future proofing is another reason why having a team is useful, but also it's another tick in the box for having a plan, because having a plan written down means that when someone else is away, it means that everything is clear for someone else to pick up on as well. And so it does mean that, you know, when you're working in a team, other people have got to be able to access that plan. So like I said, keep it in a paper copy in the office or on a shared drive somewhere, and whatever works best for your community. And then, as well as the plan, as well as the team, you're going to need some equipment to be looking and checking over your building and following your plan. You don't necessarily need everything on this list, but some of these things are going to be really helpful. So things like having gloves, so both disposable gloves and heavy duty gloves for different tasks. Having a torch if you're looking in roof spaces or down pipes. A torch is going to be helpful. Binoculars, because it's not always going to be appropriate to get up on your roof or on top of your building, but you can make a lot of good observations from ground level with a pair of binoculars. Again, if you're going into enclosed spaces, think about having a mask, think about having safety glasses or goggles. Make sure you've got a first aid kit on hand. Assume you would have one in the church building, but please do make sure you know where that is. Have a camera, and most of us are carrying around a camera these days in our pocket with our mobile phone, so you can record the condition of these different parts of your building over time and compare them, see what's getting worse or better. Get a measuring stick or a tape measure, have a clipboard and a pen to write things down. Go out with a plan if you've got a floor plan of the building. That's really helpful because you can highlight where things are. You might have that in your most recent quinquennial report. Just means you can make a note of where the issues are, and where you've taken those photos from, and a hard hat if there's any risk of anything falling on you, if you're going to be working at height at all. And again, depending on your risk assessment, because please do make sure you've done a risk assessment, especially for anything involving heights, anything involving ladders. But if your risk assessment permits you to do it, use a ladder, use that safely, and it might be appropriate. And if you've got the skills and the opportunity to use a drone to get some aerial footage of your building, it's fantastic. If you've got a tower or particularly high roof, you can send a drone up there. It means you stay safe on the ground, and you get some high quality photos. Although obviously do make sure you have the appropriate skills and permission to fly a drone, especially if you're in built up areas or you're anywhere near an airport. It's super important to know what you're doing with the drone as well. And like we said, working in a team, most of these maintenance tasks, it's going to be much better idea to do it by 2 or more people together. You know, especially when we're talking about volunteers, we don't want anyone to take any risks that would threaten their safety. And if you are on your own, please do stay at ground level unless there's safe access to go higher. You know, and when you're working on your own, keep your mobile phone with you. Tell someone else where you are and what you're going to do, and when you plan to be finished, so we can keep an eye out for each other, even if we're not physically in the same place. So when it comes to getting started, as you can see, cups of tea and biscuits are out. We're ready to go. We've got some enthusiasm. This photo is obviously taken in the summer because we've got t-shirts on. So the thing's going to look a little bit different for us as we step out and look around the building and take care of some of these maintenance issues. I have got a slide for every month of the year, but I'm not going to bore you with a 12-month maintenance plan. So I'm just going to skip ahead to this time of year and talk about the kind of things that we could be doing. So we've got a bit more time for questions. You'll see from this one that we've taken August off and gone on holiday and got some sunshine somewhere, hopefully. But as you know, as we've come into the autumn, into the winter, what are the sort of things that we should be thinking about doing? What would be in a typical maintenance plan? So as we arrive into September, we should be thinking about things like clearing the plants out of the gutters, out of the roof work, out of the stonework, if we do have any. Doing our winter prep and checking ventilation, checking pipes and water tanks, checking the roof and the roof space. So those are things to be thinking about, in September, getting one step ahead of the weather, hopefully. Anything that we think might be an issue over the winter, we can look at it now and before it becomes a serious issue. And in September we start to often see a bit of heavier rainfall, so those first signs of any leaks or water ingress, we can do a full kind of gutter and roof check at this point as well in the year. And then October, November, where we are at the minute, so that could be a good time of the year for you to check the mortar, check all the joints between all your stone and brickwork in the building, clear your gutters and your downpipes when you've got that first falling of leaves over the winter. And then November, checking your roof for damage, clear the gutters and clear the downpipes again. Like at this time of year, those leaves are falling, and that's the stuff that's going to be blocking your gutters and your downpipes. And then, when we do have the storms, and this is an important part of any maintenance plan, after any sort of major weather event, any major storm, is do go and have another check. It might be an unscheduled check, but do look for those slipped or fallen slates, and do check that your rainwater goods are in good condition. Actually, when it's raining, can be a really good time to go and check your downpipes, check your gutters are working, because you will get a really good sense of how they're working. You don't need to take a watering can up and pour some water along the gutter and down the downpipe to see what's happening. You can see it in real time. So actually, if you can bear it, get out in the wind and the rain and see how your building is holding up, because you'll spot any issues in the meantime then. And then December, do some of those internal things, like making sure your fire safety equipment is in order. If you've got fire extinguishers, hopefully you've got a contract for someone to come and service those. But make sure that's happening. Again, clear the gutters and the downpipes. Over the autumn and the winter, can't emphasize it enough, leaves are going to be falling. The gutters and drainage grates and downpipes can get blocked really, really easily. So do take extra care and clean those out. And again, when there's storms and there's snow, do go out and have a look and see what's happened after the storms and after the snow, and give it a visual inspection. And then if works arise and you need some support, take some action. So with all of that, I've mentioned, we do have a whole bunch of maintenance advice. We've got maintenance plan templates. We've got some videos showing you how to do things like check your gutters, check your rainwater goods, take a quick inspection of your pointing. We've got a bunch of videos about that on our website. And we've got advice on our small grants, which I'll come to in a minute. We've got lots of training available. We've got a database of funding and support organisations. We've got some guides to developing a project, as well as a specialist skills directory if you're looking for people to come and do those repairs that you've identified, or even carry out some of those maintenance tasks. Because clearing your gutters actually might not be appropriate for someone to do as a volunteer. It might be that you need to have a contractor with a cherry picker, or other appropriate ladders that wouldn't be safe for a volunteer to go up, but for a tradesperson to go up, it might be you need to call someone out to come and do some of these jobs for you. So we've got a specialist skills directory of people that have expertise in working with heritage buildings, so you can find contractors there as well. But I wanted to just take a couple of minutes before I finish to talk about the grants that we have available, because where these costs come up, where it could be costs for ongoing maintenance, like I said, where you need to call out a contractor to do the maintenance task for you, or you've been doing your maintenance checks and you spot that there is work that needs doing, we recognise that that can be a huge cost sometimes, and perhaps a cost that you haven't prepared for, you haven't planned for, and so we're here to help towards the cost of that. And so we offer grants for all sorts of things, but for the most part, our grants are for the fabric of the building, so the roof, the walls, the rainwater goods, you know, the stuff that makes up the building is the stuff that we want to make grants towards. So for our bigger projects, we have our large grants. Those grants can be up to £50,000 in exceptional cases, and that's a programme that's available all over the UK. If the project is over £80,000, we can grant up to 50% of eligible costs. Through that programme, we'll also fund installation of kitchen and toilets if you're looking at community facilities as well. We've got a deadline for that coming up in March. So forgive me, that slide is slightly out of date by a couple of weeks. So that the next deadline for our large grants is coming up in March. We also offer medium and small grants. Those two schemes have been merged together. So they're grants for urgent repair maintenance issues, as well as project development work. So if you have got a bigger repair project that you're trying to scope out, you're looking at maybe an options appraisal on that sort of thing, or you need a specific in-depth condition survey to help you decide on what that project is, then we can help support those things as well. And so we've got those UK-wide programmes, but we do have the Cherish Grant programme, which is specifically for churches in Scotland, Wales and North West England. But for all of our grants, we start with an eligibility quiz. So your building has to be a Christian place of worship within the UK, has to have been built as a place of worship originally, and be more than 30 years old. So I think we're all on safe ground with everyone I'm talking to here today for those two. It has to be open to the public of a minimum of 100 days a year beyond worship use. So like I was saying back at the start, we want to see people in our church buildings having them used, whether that's having them open as a place for reflection or prayer, you know, for people to wander in, or actually if there's also community activity happening in those buildings as well, that will count towards those 100 days. We need to know that you've secured at least 50% of the project cost. That could be through your own reserves, your own funds, or other grant funding as well. We won't fund a project that's already started, but you know, if your project is ready to go, then we want to hear from you. You need all the right permissions in place, especially if it's a kind of major repair project. Make sure you've got the appropriate diocesan permissions in place. And then we want to know that you've got 2 quotes in place for each element of the work, because we want to know that you are getting good value for money, and that you have, which that you're not going to be ripped off by a contractor. So actually having 2 quotes when you're spending thousands of pounds, it's really important that you do that due diligence and check the market. Also on that slide, you'll also see that the Treasure Island Winter Ready grants, those are for churches in Northern Ireland, so sadly not applicable for you guys right now. But just to touch on the Cherish grants a little bit more, so like I said, they're exclusively for churches in Scotland, Wales and North West England. Our grants through that programme start from £500 and go up to £10,000. And the upper limit for projects is £80,000. They're for essential repairs and maintenance and project development. Like I said, all the other eligibility criteria are the same, you know, about being built as a place of worship, etc. As I said before, we are kind of in the final 12 months of our Cherish project. So it does mean we've actually just got one more round of funding to go. So we've got one more deadline for our Cherish grants. So the application deadline for that is the 16th of December. I appreciate that's in about 3 or 4 weeks' time. So it's coming up soon. And I've got one more thing to say about that, but before I move on, just to say our Cherish grants are funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. So that might be a consideration for you as to whether or not that's the right grant programme to apply to. It does also involve acknowledging that grant publicly as well. So that just might be something that you want to consider. But we do recognise that, you know, when it comes to grant funding, you'll probably have a lot of questions. You'll have questions about eligibility. You'll have questions about your project. You'll have questions about, you know, what might be appropriate to apply for and what might not be. So we just made some additional space for specifically for churches in Scotland to come and ask questions and have a bit more of a sort of pre-application discussion, if that would be helpful for you. Because I'm aware, you know, in this conversation now we've got perhaps limited time for questions, and you might not want to ask all your funding related, church finance related questions in front of a group of other people. But these sessions are available every Monday and Friday lunchtime, so 1 p.m. Again, I think if you're on Bethany's mailing list, you might have already had one of these emails as well. But just to say, do come along if you've got specific questions about grants and about funding. Unfortunately, for the same reason that I'm sharing with you today, both my colleagues are unavailable for the rest of this week, David and Anne-Marie, so it'll be my turn. If you show up tomorrow, you'll get a bit more of me. But if you come along on Monday, you get to speak to David. But we'd love to talk a little bit further if you've got any specific questions or kind of things you want to talk about with regards our grant funding as well. Final thing before I go is just to say, do get in touch if you've got any questions. We've got obviously a website filled with links of really useful information, and you can get in touch with my colleagues David or Anne-Marie using that email address on the screen, Cherish Scotland at nationalchurchestrust.org, and they will very, very happily answer any questions that you have. So that's everything I had to share for now. I can see that there's been some questions in the chat which I've not been able to see.
That's fine, John. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That was super helpful, and you covered a lot of information there. Just to say that as John was speaking, I was popping some links in the chat. So if you are able to see the chat, then feel free to copy some of those links and you can have a look in more detail later on. So yeah, we've had some questions. Firstly, one about the temperature of a building. So John Hamilton said, in terms of damp prevention, they've been given the advice to always keep the building over 11 degrees. Is that something that you would recommend, John?
Obviously, it depends on the specifics of your building, but yeah, I that sounds consistent with other advice I've heard, but I couldn't speak specifically to your building, John. But if that's appropriate advice you've been given, that does sound consistent. So yes, I would go for that.
Thanks. And also, any recommendations for clearing down pipes?
Drain rods and that sort of thing are helpful if you can go in at the top and push things out at the bottom. It's just trying to break up the debris that's in there and push it out. It can be a bit of a physical job. Also, you can install things like grills and stuff at the top once the down pipes are clear. You can install a sort of leaf catcher type things that will prevent hopefully stuff going down the downpipe, because if you get a big branch or something down there, if things get really stuck, it might be the time to call someone in, and they might have to take the downpipe off and attack it from ground level as well, if there's really no other way. But yeah, drain rods, push things through, and then when it's clear, pop a grill or something on the top to hopefully prevent loads more stuff falling down.
Great. And then Craig asks, does the maintenance grant include upgrading faulty or inefficient gas boilers to a new heating system, for example, infrared heaters?
Unfortunately not. So our grants are for the fabric of the building. Roof, repointing, rainwater goods are the main things that we often end up funding. So yes, we are primarily concerned with the fabric of the building itself rather than the systems inside. But I know there are other funders available that would look at that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I've popped a link to the Net Zero portal funding page where you'll find lots of other funding options. So if you've got a big project, sometimes it's about seeing which funder will fund different aspects of a kind of bigger phased project. So Donald asked, what about if you've got, say, 2 grants that each require you to have 50% in place already? How does that work? If it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, can you get 2 to work together?
Absolutely. And I would say, you know, there are a number of funders out there that have different eligibility requirements, different levels of funding in place. You know, we work a lot with the Benefact Trust, and their requirement is 30% in place. So it might be that you go to them first, and get a small grant. But I think the other thing I would say is do come and talk to us before you apply if you've got questions. If it's another funder whose funding is contingent on our funding, we can probably try and have a conversation and meet in the middle somewhere. So yeah, do come and talk to us, and we can hopefully make those timelines work together for you.
Great.
Thank you.
I don't know if you'll be able to answer this yet, but someone was asking what might happen after the Cherish project. For churches that's, you know, that deadline's a bit too soon.
Yeah, of course. Well, the first thing to say would be our sort of national UK-wide programmes are continuing through into next year. And actually, because of our presence in Scotland, that we've not had offices in Scotland before, but over the last 2 years we have, which has meant that we've been able to see more Scottish churches than ever through our large grants programme, which has been fantastic. So not just Cherish funding, but more of our funding has gone to Scotland than it has done in recent years. And yeah, we are very keen to continue working in Scotland, and so it's for us at the moment. It's just a question of trying to get the right things in place. I don't have any, unfortunately, announcements to share with you today, but we're working hard to make sure that we can continue to support churches in Scotland beyond next year as well.
Fantastic. That's what we like to hear. What about architects' fees? Is that come under project support?
Yes. So with all of our grants programs, you can include architects' fees as part of your costs. So that they're included in the project costs that we can fund. And again, with your project development work, a lot of that might be professional fees as well. So when it comes to the options appraisal and project planning stuff, we'll fund up to REBA stage 1, and then again we'll fund professional fees for things like condition surveys, or if you've got kind of specific reports that you need to be able to plan your work, we can fund those as well. But yeah, with all of our repair grants, please do include professional fees in your project costs, because those are eligible.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, John. I don't know if anyone's got any other questions. We've got a couple more minutes if anything comes to mind, if people want to just unmute themselves to ask, or any comments or experiences.
Hello, could I ask about 100 days? That is something which a lot of Scottish churches don't open their doors. Sort of in Catholic churches tend to, Church of Scotland and Episcopal, there's a mixture. How do you encourage people to actually do that when it's a big of a culture change?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say one of the first and most important things to do is speak with your insurer, to make sure that you are covered insurance-wise for the building being open. And for a lot of churches, it is a bit of a journey. So jumping between being completely closed during the week to being open every day might not be the thing that you can do right now. I was talking to a group of churches in Manchester yesterday, and one of them came up with the suggestion that, that when they've got people working on the garden and the church grounds, they're going to open the doors as a first step. Where it might be that you say, well, actually, we know that there's high footfall on a Thursday because there's such and such market in the town or events or whatever. So we're going to open during those times, put a sign out saying the church is open, and see who comes in. We also have through the project sent out a number of visitor counters to churches. If you can get your hands on a visitor counter, they cost about £100, and you can actually just get a sense of how many people are coming in, and you would probably be surprised. People are terrible at signing visitor books, but they do come and have a look at the church. And so if you've got some way of monitoring how many people are coming in, I think you'd be surprised and excited at the number of people that are interested in the church building. So start small, start manageable, take it in steps, and make sure your insurer is aware. I know if you're insured with ecclesiastical insurance, they've got a whole raft of support and advice around being open as well, and very much actively encourage it if it's the right thing for your church.
I've just begun working with 4 churches in Brecon Diocese. I'll be talking to Jack, and 3 of them are not heated. Well, and the 4th has some heating, but really hasn't been heated. So I'm basically starting from ground zero. I've also got to get the quinquennials. So there's mold in the vestry. There's all sorts of things. So I'm going to be in contact with a lot of you in the near future, and I've got the AGM at the end of the month, so I'll be talking and presenting some of this information to them. So yeah, thanks for this, and also you'll be hearing from me in the future.
Oh, looking forward to it. Thank you, Eleanor.
When you say churches have to be open for 100 days, how long in the day do they have to be open?
Yes, so we can be a little bit flexible with that. I mean, a typical day opening might be 10 till 4. It's very sort of typical. But if you've got multiple sessions of community activities happening through the week, let us know. When we say it's an eligibility criteria, it's not a simple tick box exercise, because every church is different and they do different things across the week. And so we try and factor all of that in terms of making our grant recommendations to our grants committee. And so yeah, kind of 35 minutes between over someone's lunch break probably doesn't count as a day, but a good chunk of hours we would count as a day. So 100 days every year, obviously it works out about 2 days a week, if that's helpful to put it in those relative terms, which I'm sure you'd already worked out. But yeah, about 2 days a week beyond worship. Yeah, it is different culture in different parts of the UK. Is a very astute observation that Donna made, and so it can feel like a lot. Like I said, start small. The other thing that we do say is, if it's appropriate for your church, to advertise key holder details. So maybe you've got a team of church wardens that live nearby, who would be at home and available to come and open the building, or perhaps you've got a friendly pub over the road that wouldn't mind holding a key for you, we'd also kind of consider key holder details being available as part of that 100 days as well.
Yeah.
Paul just commented in the chat that some Church of Scotland churches open to the public for their Kirk session meetings. So that might be something that SEC churches could do when they're holding vestry meetings. Another good idea there.
Yeah,
great.
good
Well,
shout.
thank you so much, John. That was a really helpful session. So thank you for your time and all your expertise. We're going to move on now to our sharing stories session. And to start us off, Ian from the Net Zero team is going to share some of the details of case studies from our Benefact Trust projects, and then there'll be opportunities for people to ask questions and also tell us a bit about what's happening in your own local contexts. So I will hand over now to Ian.
Hello, everybody. I wanted to take a little bit of time to discuss the Net Zero Grant Awards. This is a strategic partnership that we established with the Benefact Trust and the Scottish Episcopal Church. With over £700,000, we're looking to invest that over 2 years and empower 28 churches to plan, test, and deliver real net zero solutions. And we understand that the learning that we generate from this will fuel a lot of case studies and resources that will hopefully inspire more action across the province. If any of these projects do inspire ideas, do get in contact with our team. We're here to help and support, and you start your own ones as well. If you'd also be interested in being part of the 2026 round funding, please get in contact with your local representative. We are taking expressions of interest, so please get in touch with that. With that all said, let's move into the project, and I'll ask for some input from the various team members that have helped. It saves me talking for too long. So we'll start with the pilot grants. These are £7,250, and we'll be starting with St Turnans and Bankery. This has taken some feasibility work looking at the installation of a solar array. Much of this work's looked at kind of carbon savings, where the installations could take place, and any additional works that they might be considering in their longer term plan. This is quite a large scale project, so we are looking at quite a long term vision, care for creation, and kind of active steps to care for the world that we're all called to steward. Jack, is there anything you'd want to additionally add into your experiences working on this project?
I'd say that, excuse me, I'd say that this has been a good example of the funds empowering a church to take ownership of possible decarbonization in the future. The vestry and the wider eco team at St Turnans, I think it had a number of ideas over a couple of years, but it had found it hard to really develop a specific focus in terms of what they wanted to do, and therefore really good ideas and positive enthusiasm didn't necessarily translate into action. So this support, financial support, certainly has been limited so far to scoping and development work, but aside even just from the immediate physical impact of developing plans and programs for what they're going to do hopefully in the new year, I've seen that the support and of course the funds have really done a good deal of work to empower the vestry to feel that the building projects which they've been talking about for years aren't as out of reach as they might have thought, and they are seeing a bit clearer what they can possibly do. So I'm looking forward to the culmination of what may come to pass. Probably a solar array, I think, and as I said, perhaps the consideration of a heat pump in this beautiful church.
Great. Thanks for that, Jack. If we can move on to St Peter's Stornoway, please. I've had the pleasure of going to visit St Peter's. They're exploring quite a comprehensive project, to be honest. And they're looking at a solar array on their kind of more modern community hall. And this one preserves the historic look of the building, but also makes the actual installation a lot easier. So that's a solar array and a battery system. And they're also looking to upgrade their older electric heating system that they've got, considering looking at a heat pump. The congregation's worked really hard to put an expression of interest into the CARES Community Building Fund. So this is where some of the money's coming from to expand upon that project. So far, they've already raised money to do planning permission work and lighting upgrades within the church. And that was done alongside support from the planning officers at the local authority. So it's nice to see with many of these projects, we're bringing in different community assets to help make the work a little bit lighter. It also provides quite a good context of island communities taking on net zero projects. The suppliers we're looking at were often local to the island, so that helps the local economy, but also shows a kind of a proactive approach to fundraising. So that was utilising 3 different funds to get the project moving. Next, we'll be looking on to St Turnan's, Muckles and Brecon. Again, I'll pull in Jack for his insights. But this was moving from a biomass boiler to a more modern infrared heating system. There's also been a bit of a comprehensive feasibility plan that's also went into this. The work so far has helped to decouple the heating system from the attached rectory. This has allowed a kind of long-term plan to come into fruition where the rectory is looking to be sold with the hopes that the money generated would allow for a more high quality residence for the rector and that would be utilising it. And this kind of again shows how quite complex projects can be tackled with the support of our team looking at this kind of long-standing issue. Jack, is there anything else you'd want to add into this?
Yeah, this has been quite a difficult issue for the church in recent years, replacing the only biomass wood pellet boiler in use in the province. The biomass boiler is in between the church and the rectory, and even though the rectory has been privately let for a while, it heats both properties, which has presented some issues. And as has been said, as the rectory is sought to be sold soon, the church needed to come up with a plan, and these funds have cut through the noise of all the different solutions which they might have considered, and is enabling them to move forward at a very quick pace to get rid of, again, the only biomass boiler in the province, and to install, I believe it will be radiant heaters. So this has been a really, I think, useful fund for St. Turnan's, and as I said, things are moving at a very quick pace, and they've secured a loan from the Diocese of Brecon to complete the project in the new year, so they've been able to use the funds available from the Benefact Trust for the feasibility to move it along very quickly at a timeline which suits them.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Jack. Next, St James, the Lesser, and Pennycook. Neil, I'll draw on some of your insights for this. This was a feasibility study looking at a ground source heat pump. Still quite in the early stages of this, but it's part of the long-term decarbonisation plan for the church. From my understanding, there's additional fundraising coming in place, looking at the next stage, which would be the installation following the information gathered. We understand that heat pumps are often a point of interest for churches, and you'll see throughout this presentation there's various churches looking at different types of the heat pumps and different types of buildings, so hopefully that will give some much needed information and confidence if you're considering a similar project. Neil, is there anything you'd want to add in from your time working on it?
I'd just say that there's a recognition that the gas boiler needs to be replaced. It's on its last legs. most heat pumps tend to be air source. At St James, they've got quite a lot of ground around the church and the rectory. There's not a graveyard, so they have the space. So the money's for a feasibility study into using ground source rather than an air source heat pump. So the money has been spent on the feasibility study of installing a slightly different heat pump that most of us have probably considered.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Neil. Next, there'd be St Augustine's in Dumbarton. Again, one of the projects that I helped work with. What they're going through just now is a trial period looking at infrared heaters within the building. There's 4 currently in place, and this will be tested for the next few months with the plan to expand upon a full installation if the property committee is kind of happy with how things are developing. From the information we've got so far, it's well reviewed, and it's hoped that this will significantly reduce emissions for the church as they need to rely less on their current gas heating system. I've also been working with the Glasgow Building Preservation Trust, who have added additional expertise and support for the project as a whole. What they're looking at just now is fundraising efforts to get a new service engineer that will additionally build upon this proposal, potentially looking at underfloored plenum heating, as well as having a conservation accredited architect help support it, as well as experienced trade people who have worked on similar buildings within Glasgow, as well as the Glasgow Building Preservation Trust. It's probably important to say this is a Grade A listed building in a conservation area. It comes with a lot of difficulties, so it's hopefully this displays the kind of care we put into the historic aspect of these buildings. Finally, going on to the last pilot project, we're looking at St Andrews. St Andrews, Bethany, I'll be looking for some of your insights on this, but this is building upon some historic commitments that have already been put in place. You can see from the picture there, they've had quite extensive solar panels put on, as well as a solar water heater. But for this current project, what they're looking at is 2 Herschel Halo heaters, infrared again, that would be installed in the nave. These would be used to support the midweek groups and services, but there's a longer term plan to remove the gas boiler and with a more sustainable heating system. Bethany, anything you want to share?
Yeah, so yeah, it's a really exciting project, and as Ian said, this church has already been a great case study. Being a listed building in a conservation area, it was a challenge for them to get solar panels on their roof, but they didn't take no for an answer, and they persevered. But they're very keen to be a net zero church, and they're using this pilot money to trial these halo heaters that will probably then be rolled out throughout the rest of the building. We've already got Herschel chandelier heaters in the Lady Chapel at St Mary's Cathedral in Edinburgh, and also in St Anne's Dunbar. But it'll be great to have more examples of infrared heating being used in Episcopal churches. The church has also looked into options for heat pumps, and they've decided that in the future they would get a heat pump in the church hall, but likely not in the main space of the church because it's got really high ceilings. So they're going to focus on the targeted heating the people approach of the infrared heating. St Andrews has also been really busy applying for funding for a lot of maintenance work. So drawing on what we heard earlier from John, they've got a big repointing project going on. So they're kind of looking at their fabric as well as looking at how they can move away from their gas boiler through these different heating systems in the church and the hall. So they've got a lot going on, and this is kind of one part of a much bigger phased project.
Perfect. Thanks, Bethany. Next, we'll be looking at Pioneer grants. These are £43,000 and 500. And we'll be starting with St John's Evangelist in Aberdeen. This project's quite ambitious, as many of these kind of large projects will be. This one involves solar power, battery storage, and insulation. And much of this was informed by the Heat Hack project that they did. And this is an organisation, a charity that we work alongside, that helps to kind of look at how the building's used and kind of what solutions might be considered. It's also quite a strong case study about interfaith partnership working. Currently, there is an agreement that the hall is shared with a local mosque, making it one of Scotland's first Christian-Muslim partnerships. Again, Jack, would you like to speak on this at all and your experiences?
Yeah, just to say, St. John's has been a real pleasure to work with, and it's been very heartening to see what the commitment of these funds are doing for their ambitions. They have been a real leader within the Diocese of Aberdeen and Orkney for as long as there's been a net zero program provincially, and they have developed a net zero 2030 plan. So in being able to commit these funds to their projects, they've been able to just jump leaps and bounds ahead of where they thought they were going to be on the timeline to 2030, and the way that they're innovatively using these funds to think of new and exciting ways to decarbonize their space has been really inspiring. So been very happy to work with them through this, and I think that they'll continue to be a model for other churches to visit and learn from and work together with.
Great. Thank you so much. Next, we'll be looking at Holy Trinity Dunoon. This is in Argyll and the Isles. Like many of these projects, they are looking at a combined approach. So in this instance, they're looking at infrared heating, solar power generation, and battery storage. With the thought process behind this being that they can use off-peak energy after 12 o'clock to store cheaper energy, and then use the locally generated electricity to reduce emissions during the day. This approach has been kind of similarly approached at a lot of these different churches. We found this is a good way to make the most of reducing costs, reducing carbon, and improving the quality of the heating within quite difficult to address spaces, with the aim to improve community use within them and ideally get more people through the doors. Next would be St Ninian's Dundee. They have successfully installed the solar panels that we were aiming to do. They've also got 11.6 kilowatt battery storage in place and infrared heating. Much of the work that went into place have been influenced by Business Energy Scotland energy assessment. The next steps that they're looking at is to completely phase out gas within the church and remove their old boiler with plans to put in a solar water heater. Jack, anything else you want to add in?
Yeah, just to say this is another instance of the funds from the Benefact Trust, I think, allowing the church to think a lot bigger as to what they can possibly achieve. The initial application which they put in, it put in place these new radiant heaters, there's new solar panels, you see draft proofing, insulation, a new electric range, and there was still a little bit left over. So they decided to go a bit further and introduced that solar water heater and actually removed their gas boiler. So we've seen the complete decarbonization of a church in an area of Dundee where I believe this is the only community space left, and also the last remaining church in the area. So this has been a real inspiring project and has taken a load off their minds in terms of keeping the building warm and usable for various purposes throughout the week.
Thank you, Jack. Next, it's St Leonard's Laswade in Edinburgh. Again, this is a project looking at an air source heat pump combined with infrared panels and new insulation both to the underfloor and loft areas, with the aim to really make the most of the heat that they are generating within the building. Additionally, they were able to raise £20,000 from the ASDA Foundation. It really shows a great effort in, again, combining these various different funding options creatively to address their project. Neil, is there anything you'd want to add into this?
I'd just say that this was part of a wider reordering. They've taken the pews out. They've put a disabled access to the loo, and they want to put in a kitchen area at the back. So they've combined two projects, one which is not net zero and one that is. Clearly, there's savings to be made to be doing two projects at the same time. But yes, they combined the two funds and they've done a really good job in their church. It looks and is a much warmer, inviting space through this work.
Perfect. Thanks, Neil. Next, it's St Mary the Virgin in Hamilton. Again, it's a project that I've helped work on. And what they've opted for is not to include a battery in their project, but instead to do a much more comprehensive solar array. If I remember correctly, it's about 40 different panels. The site's primarily used during the day. So the thought process with this is that they would have greater levels of generation to support their daily processes while making the most of their smart export guarantee to bring additional funds towards the church. So again, this provides a different look as far as case studies go when comparing to projects that went from battery versus people that have simply went for the direct generation. We'll move on to St Finian's, Lochgelly. Again, this is a project looking at an air-to-air heat pump, solar PV to support those costs of running it, a battery storage to make the most of off-peak costs, and insulation to help retain that heat. Funds have already been put in place to do the feasibility studies and work's underway. Bethany, anything else you'd want to add in?
Yeah, just that it's another really inspiring project with some fantastic people to work with. Father Jerry, the priest, has done amazing work in Glen Rothes, and the church there is already an incredible community hub, providing community kitchens and cafes and supporting people in an area of real deprivation. And his vision for St Finian's Lochgelly is to create a similar community hub in an area where there are not other alternatives, and there's a huge amount of need. So it's really exciting that he's combining his passion for the people in the area, his passion for his faith and for the environment, to draw all these different aspects together to create a sustainable and welcoming space where people will want to come in and connect with the church, but also where the church can really serve that local community. So yeah, a really exciting net zero project in progress.
Thanks so much, Bethany. Last but not least, we'll be looking at St Andrews for Troes. Again, a relatively simple project and similar to some of the other ones we've discussed already. They're looking to remove their oil-fired central heating and move to a heat pump that would again be supported by a solar array that'd be facing south-facing cliffs. Again, it provides just more context that we'll be able to draw upon as things go forward. If we could end the presentation there, I'll just do a little bit of a summary. Across all these different projects, we've seen themes emerge. Churches are actively looking at long-term challenges that they've been facing around heating, building conditions, but through these trials of new technologies, and we've seen already reductions in carbon, and they'll make hopefully meaningful differences to their operational costs. Early feasibility work help churches to build confidence and be informed in their decisions, understand any technical restraints that they need to work with, and it offers up a phased plan or approach that we can help look at different funds to address those. These are all really good examples of how the public perception of these churches has also been really improved upon in many regards, as it shows actively environmental stewardship. It often opened up new opportunities for collaboration with different funders or organizations, or even different churches. There's ecumenical work where this knowledge is shared, and we hope that the examples shown can give examples in rural, urban, historic, and modern context. So with that, I hope that was valuable. And I would just ask Aidan to unmute the chat, and if there's any questions, we can go through them as a team. And it would also be great to hear about any stories that are going on in your churches just now, or any sort of projects that you might have ambitions to pursue following this. Paul.
Thanks, Ian. One of the things I did just want to say is that in the examples of these projects that the team have just gone through, it can't be emphasized enough how each project is quite unique and quite different. And one of the things that can feel quite disempowering is this idea that you don't know who to speak to, and that the application processes are all sort of people behind barriers. But in almost every one of these projects, it's been situations where people have just spoken to people and solutions have been found. Where there hasn't been money, people have spoken to us, we've spoken to funders. The funders are all people as well. And I think it was also explained earlier, if you feel like there's a barrier there, quite often just a conversation can actually say, oh, actually, we didn't know that barrier existed. Let's see if we can find a way to work around it. That's often been our experience with funders, where they don't necessarily know the barriers because they're not working on the projects. But when churches say, we can't do this because of this particular reason, you can speak to them, you can speak to us, we can speak to them. And that can actually make a really big difference to actually the human side of project is something that's often talked about the least, but that's really what makes them actually succeed.
Thanks so much, Paul. I think we'll go to the chat first, just because it's the order it came in. Eleanor was asking about the cost of electricity for the HVAC system. Neil, I don't know if you've got any insights on that yet, but I'll throw that to you if that's okay.
Short answer is no, but 1 kilowatt of electricity will generate through an air source heat pump or ground source heat pump between roughly 3 times that amount, 3 kilowatts of heat. So pound for pound, using your electricity for a heat pump is financially very good, as well as good for reducing your carbon emissions. So although electricity is relatively expensive, you will essentially use less of it than you would, for example, gas heating.
Just to kind of build on that as well, I think with many of our projects, that's why we've looked at solar panels to offset some of those costs, and battery systems to make use of off-peak. So electricity is typically about 3 times cheaper when it's off-peak, and that energy can be stored overnight and help to run these electric systems. So again, it's helping to reduce those costs as much as possible, so it is not a burden on the treasurers, I suppose. Hopefully that's okay, but we can come back to it if needed. Donald.
I was just wondering if I add something to Paul's sort of summary. Way back in the beginning, Eco Congregation Scotland, which I used to chair at one point, I think a church in Hamilton was the 2nd award to be gained, and they have a long standing sort of engagement, and I think that bears fruit. And likewise, St Andrews, on a comment made years ago at the General Synod by Alan Werty, who's a professor there. He said, plan in advance for how you describe why you need to do what you need to do, what your church is like, so that when there is a grant opportunity, you've already done a lot of the homework and you don't have to then spend ages and ages and ages against a really tight schedule. But in a sense, plan in advance what you might be doing even before you know whether there's a grant anywhere. Well, that was really good advice.
A very wise bit of information you got there, Donald. Yeah, it's something our team can also help with. On our website, we have identified, I think it's over 60 different funds at this point. As well as that, there's local funds that we're finding every day, and partners like the Glasgow Preservation Trust that are helping us with writing the funding applications, that are helping to build those connections with the different funders. So day on day, we're hopefully having a more robust amount of information we can help put forward to Mark.
Yeah, thanks for this. It's really great to know that you guys are kind of the spread of what you're doing, which is awesome. The really my question is, well, we work with a lot of sort of net zero projects in Scotland, but also nationally, and where there's a really compelling kind of social return on investment, where we're talking about, you know, the fact that the building use, that's really great. But I also recognize a lot of churches aren't as, you know, footfall isn't as big. And do you have any examples of kind of projects like that, you know, have been successful in sort of having a project come to completion, I guess?
Ooh. Feel free to jump in, anybody from the team just now. I'm racking my brains. A lot of these projects are things that we've been working on over the last kind of year and a half while we've been in place. As far as completion, Jack, do you want to talk about some of the ones that are in quite deprived areas? I think that maybe makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, each project very much is different, and it can't be ignored that vestry capacity has a really large impact on what is realistic within a certain time frame for a church to achieve. But I think, as has been said by others and by Paul, having us here as a team to specifically work with individual charges to determine what their realistic ambitions are and support as they navigate their way through the grant process or the project development process. We have seen success with that, and the aim of the Benefact program as well is to have local examples for charges throughout the entire province to visit and to learn from and to work together with going forward. So there isn't necessarily a silver bullet, and working particularly in deprived areas can be quite difficult in terms of building up capacity specifically, but it's something that is definitely a main priority of ours as a team.
Yeah. If I can add on
I can chip in if you'd like to as well. It's just to say, in some cases, if there's a church that's got quite low footfall, then like every project, we need to have a look at what the necessity is for significant work in that building. In most cases, if it's a church that's low footfall, then you're probably, most cases we're looking at maintenance first. Chances are that's the priority for that building, to improve its thermal performance just by way of maintenance and those sorts of things, and reducing costs. When it comes to full kind of net zero interventions and decarbonisation, we try to move towards electrification where we can, although there are grid issues that can arise. But we also need to evaluate actually what is the impact of the carbon impact of this particular building, if it's not being used very much, and does it warrant a large, you know, project that is disproportionate to the footprint of a small underused building, and so lesser used building, not necessarily underused. So very quickly, once you bring those factors into play, you have a very unique project for the community that's using that building. One of the things that we would like to do is actually look at these buildings and look at the social value of the building, even if it's not necessarily being occupied. What is the value of that building actually being present and well maintained for the community that surrounds it, and the sense of place and culture and history that buildings represent, which is something that's not really measured. It's not, the Scottish Government doesn't really measure these sorts of things, but we recognise that those have value in a community as well. And that makes those difficult to fund, admittedly. Nevertheless, we're quite keen to try and find ways to make sure that those buildings do receive the appropriate funding that is contextually relevant. But it does make that, I'm not going to say that that's easy, because they're not the fancy projects that people want to fund to put their badge on.
If I can add just a kind of final words, I don't want to eat into your lunch too much. If we're looking at some of the projects, places like St Peter's and Stornoway, smaller church, potentially less footfall than something you might get on one of the big cities. And to kind of make broader shoulders to support that project, we did engage with the local authority. Us as a team, we are here to help support looking at these different funding options and where basically to start. The DEGs, the Diocesan Environmental Groups, are all in place to assist with these sort of projects, as well as the diocesan offices often have ways to support. So there are these various different helping hands that can make work a bit lighter, and we do always try and kind of build that support network around these churches, so they do have people that can take these projects forward.
Great, thank you so much, Ian. I think I would also just quickly add that if you take St Andrews as an example, they were thinking of getting a heat pump for their main space of the actual church. And then when they looked into it, they realised that yes, they do have small and midweek services and use aspects of that space during the week, but actually using the infrared heating to target the people in that vast space that most of the time does not need to be warm made a lot better sense financially and in terms of their carbon footprint, whereas the hall is a very different space. And so that's why in the longer term they're planning to put an air-to-air heat pump in the hall, which is used throughout the week, and actually maintaining a sort of baseline temperature in that space is a lot more logical. So yeah, each church is different. Sometimes the church itself doesn't have a high footfall, but the hall might. Or like St Finian's Lochgelly, currently it's got a really low footfall, but there's a huge need and a huge ambition and vision to change that. So yeah, every different situation is so unique, but that's where it's really valuable to share, isn't it, and hear what's happening in different contexts. We're going to take a little screen break now. If people want to stay on the call and chat, that's absolutely fine. But equally, go and make yourself a coffee, have a break, and we will come back together to hear from Lauren from Christian Aid at 11:45. So we've got just about 10 minutes or so. Lauren also said if people could grab some paper and pencil, that might be helpful during the next workshop session. So we'll see everybody back in 10 minutes or so.
Thanks for that, Bethany. I need to go now. So if anyone's got any questions to do with infrared heating, as you saw in some of the presentation there, just drop me an email at craig@flexcell.co.uk and we'll arrange a free site visit for you to look at your heating options. Thanks again for the time today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Craig. And I'll mention that when people come back on the call again.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye now.
May I
Thanks also, John.
But yeah, lovely to see you all, and be in touch soon.
Yeah, massive thanks for your input. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Hi everyone, hopefully you can hear me okay. It's great to be with you today and to see even some familiar faces on the Zoom. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm Lauren and I work for Christian Aid in Scotland in the church engagement and community fundraising team here. So I'm going to preface today's workshop just by letting you know that my expertise and experience lies a little bit more in the fundraising side of things. So there might be, if you have some specific questions about this campaign, and I don't immediately have the answer, I will certainly take them away and pass them on to colleagues in our campaigning team. But it's great to be with you and to hear about all of the good work being done by the Scottish Episcopal churches to decarbonise and work towards lowering the carbon footprint of your churches. And you might be wondering why I'm here to talk about Christian Aid's latest international climate justice campaign when you're trying to motivate people to take action personally and in your church. But we believe that reducing Scotland's domestic emissions is significant, not just for the people of Scotland, but also for helping our global neighbours who are suffering as a result of the climate crisis, and in particular when they have done so little to cause this problem. And so as Christians, our neighbours are not just those in our community, but people around the world. And so setting our kind of local work in a more global picture can be quite helpful. And in fact, if you are working towards an eco award with eco congregations, then I think engaging with this campaign can help towards achieving that. So yeah, if we move on to the next slide, just a quick kind of run through of the workshop. I will give you a brief introduction to Christian Aid and specifically the Restore campaign, although I'm sure many of you are familiar with Christian Aid's work already. We're going to have a go at creating something artsy, it says in the slide, but really this is just an opportunity for you to write down some thoughts and feelings you have and what your message is to leaders with regard to this campaign. And then I will finish up kind of sharing with you how you might share this work with your church and how you can get others involved. Great, so if we can move onto the next slide. So many of you will know that Christian Aid is a global movement. We are the relief and development agency of a number of sponsoring denominations across the UK. And most importantly, we are a global movement of people, churches, and local organisations. We work with people of all faiths and none towards a world where everyone can live a dignified life free from poverty. And we have some core themes to our work. So if we jump actually 2 slides this time, these themes are climate adaptation and resilience, gender justice, governance and rights, peace building and conflict prevention, and humanitarian relief. On the previous slide, sorry, those were a little bit jumbled, but we very much work in partnership. So we work through local partners in about 25 countries, providing community-led long-term development work as well as humanitarian response to disasters. And something really key is that climate justice actually cuts across pretty much all of our work. And that is because for nearly 20 years, our partners have been telling us that it's the climate crisis that is making poverty permanent. And so our partners work with communities to adapt to a changing climate and unreliable weather patterns. So the campaign that I'm going to be talking a little bit about today is the Restore campaign that some of you might have heard of already. And we've just got a short video which is a bit of an introduction to this campaign. So hopefully the sound will work. We'll give it a go and see if the video will play for us. Now, I'm not getting the sound. Is anyone else experiencing the same?
Yeah, we can see it, but not hear it.
Okay, we might have to do a take two and see if it works.
Other are breaking.
Great.
Systems failing. And yet we know God is at work restoring and healing. And we can join his work. Together we created the fair trade movement that's benefited farmers across the globe. Together we've spoken truth to power, even when our voices shake. Together we've stood with people living in poverty, just as Jesus did. Right now, reckless polluters and greedy lenders are fueling the climate crisis and trapping countries in debt. 25 African countries spend more on debt payments than education, meaning millions are missing from school. Meanwhile, droughts and floods are destroying communities. People living in poverty are hit hardest. It doesn't have to be this way. Together, we can play our part in God's work to restore creation and see the flourishing of all people. Join us.
Great, thank you. So to go, that was a kind of introduction to the campaign, and to go a little deeper, what is the Restore campaign about? So we know that the climate crisis is trapping millions of people in poverty, making global inequalities much worse. And the scale of this climate crisis cannot be overstated. So we know that 2024 was the hottest year on record, and between 3.3 and 3.6 billion people live in contexts highly vulnerable to climate change, with droughts, floods, wildfires, and rising sea levels occurring every year across the world. The impacts of the climate crisis are hitting the poorest and least responsible the hardest. And to be specific about this campaign, what we're talking about is that the most polluting companies and countries are not taking responsibility for their current and historic pollution. And so climate finance from wealthier countries has been inadequate to date and is often in the form of loans, which then deepen the debt crisis faced by many countries. And the world's most climate vulnerable countries are now spending twice as much on debt repayments than they actually receive in climate finance. So this kind of issue with debt and the climate crisis are compounding one another, with many countries now facing this double crisis of the debt repayments and the climate crisis. And it's inhibiting them spending money on vital services like healthcare and education. I think the stat here is 32 African countries now spend more in paying external debts than they do on healthcare, whilst 25 spend more on debt than education. Greedy private lenders are refusing to cancel or negotiate debts and making billions of pounds from lending money. And some examples of these kind of private lenders are financial institutions, including high street banks and financial companies. So some examples are kind of BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Aberdeen Investment. Both of these crises are rooted in the past, the global North's extraction of wealth and resources from the global South over centuries. And so we know that as Christians, we are called to respond to injustice and poverty. And so by joining this campaign and persuading the UK government to act, we can join with God's work to restore creation and see the flourishing of all people. I'm just going to use a case study from Guatemala, which was actually one of the kind of stories that was covered this year during Christian Aid Week. So you might have already engaged with the stories of Aurelia and Amelia during Christian Aid Week, but I think the next slide shows the image of Aurelia. Perfect, thank you. So Indigenous farming communities like Aurelia's in Guatemala are being threatened by droughts and storms, and so their livelihoods, traditions and survival are at risk. And the kind of dry and rainy seasons are intensifying and shifting erratically, and so crops are failing and becoming very unreliable, which is plunging families into hunger and poverty. And we know that this is a deep injustice because these communities have done the least to cause the climate crisis, but as we've said, are enduring the impact the most. But Aurelia is quite an inspiring lady, so she's passing on her knowledge to others in her community to help people farm with more resilience. So one of our partners, Koikop, provided some training in her community, and through that training, Aurelia is now combining ancient and modern agricultural methods to cultivate native seeds that are much more resilient and drought resistant. And she's also learned how to make an organic fertilizer, which enriches the soil and conserves water. And she's also then kind of passing on the knowledge of how to make that fertilizer to others. And the other lady in the story this year was Amelia. So she's a younger woman who's also doing so much in her community through this training from the partner. Is really encouraging people to engage in her community with issues of like land rights and how to really conserve the natural farming methods but make them more sustainable, I suppose, for the long term with the changing climate. So these communities are tackling the climate crisis head on, and they're determined and proactive despite the issues that they're facing. And so you might wonder, how does this story kind of fit into the Restore campaign and the climate asks? So we believe that Aurelia shouldn't be fighting the climate crisis alone. But secondly, as we mentioned earlier, we also believe that the most polluting companies and countries have a responsibility to people who are fleeing the effects of the climate crisis. And so to delve a bit deeper into the campaign and one of the asks of this campaign, on the next slide, there's a picture of a pot, a kintsugi pot. I think I'm saying it correctly. And so this is inspired by the Japanese concept of kintsugi, and that's the kind of repairing of broken pottery with gold that you might have seen before, and it takes something broken and actually putting it together with the gold, it turns out to be indeed something quite beautiful. So we are constructing a giant kintsugi pot patched together with messages of hope and prayers for our broken world. And we're asking our supporters to contribute to this pot by writing prayers and messages of solidarity for those impacted by the crisis. And also kind of describing perhaps their hopes for a restored world. And then some of the more creative amongst us are maybe drawing some images or including some arty bits on their contributions as well. So as an activity, we're asking people to contribute to this either with their church or at a craft or youth group, or even just kind of inviting friends over. And so we are going to give it a go on the workshop today. I'm aware that normally if I was running this workshop in person, we'd all be sitting around a table and we would have plenty of supplies, and hopefully the conversation would be flowing. But I think for today, I'm going to play a song in the background whilst we kind of write down our contributions, and hopefully then we can kind of come back and share some of our thoughts and feelings. So the kind of things to consider on when we're coming up with what to write are kind of two main questions. So what is it that you want to see restored in our world in the light of the climate and debt crises? And that's kind of the first part. And then the second part is, what would you like to say to decision makers about the need for repair and restoration in our world? So these are the two kind of main things to keep in the back of your mind whilst you're scribbling away. And just again, if we were in person, I would maybe have some examples of things that other people have contributed. But sometimes it's even been something as simple as one word written down. And yeah, there's many ways that we can approach this. So I think on the next slide, there's a song. Brilliant. So we'll just kind of listen to the song, and if you've got pen and paper ready, I would invite you to write down or draw some of your reflections in light of the campaign.
I have a voice, you have a voice, we have a voice, and when we sing together, a line is drawn and hope reborn. This is the song of kingdom come. I have a voice, you have a voice, we have a voice. When we sing together, a line is drawn and hope reborn. This is the song of kingdom come. We heard the cries of distant neighbors, the dispossessed, the refugee, and God's command to feed the hungry, and set them free, and set them free. We heard the word, the new commandment, and we reclaimed the prophet's call to love the world without condition. God's love for all, God's love for all. I have a voice, you have a voice, we have a voice. When we sing together, the line is drawn and hope reborn. This is the song of kingdom come. A reckless love that knows no borders, that speaks the truth to those in power, that shines a light on cruel indifference. This is God's hour, this is God's hour, when we will stand against injustice with all who live against the grain, until their poverty is over and love shall reign, and love shall reign. I have a voice, you have a voice, we have a voice. When we sing together, the line is drawn and hope reborn. This is the song of kingdom come. We won't stand by while sisters suffer, nor turn blind eyes to ruthless wrong. have a voice when we sing together. A line is drawn and hope reborn. This is the song of kingdom come. This is the song of kingdom come.
Great. I don't know if folk would like a couple more minutes to finish their creations, but if anyone is feeling brave, does anyone want to share what they've written or what they've drawn, or just any thoughts in general on the kind of 2 reflection points?
I've really enjoyed that song, and I've had experience of the jar. I won't attempt to pronounce it, but yes, but excellent. I've written down 4 things: 1 long, 3 short. But a big concern would be to end debt bondage, ban suicide seed. I thought some of the words in the song were really inspiration, and love shall reign was very powerful. And I'd also want to put some sort of a prayer to governments to say, help us to think of who we're giving to, rather than how helping them can benefit us.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you.
I think mine was quite similar to that in a way. I put reparation for loss and damage for the global south countries that are the worst affected by poverty and debt associated with changes in climate, and for us to ensure that politicians support funding of these poorest countries, and again in that same context, rather than what they can give us in oil or resources, but really about helping those poorest countries rebuild their lives.
Thank you.
Make them fit places to live.
I'm a retired chemist, and that's what has influenced me, and especially when Mossmorland was in the news yesterday. So I'm saying use green, which are sustainable chemicals, in place of those derived from fossil fuels. Now, there was going to be something happening in Grangemouth, but I think it's fallen apart. So that's where the government needs to come in.
Thank you.
I'll kind of put mine in. They're kind of one and the same, and it's really to build communities in a future that generations to come will be proud of, I suppose. And I don't really have the artistic ability to do it, but I've always been quite inspired by a genre called solar punk. I'll share some of those art pieces if that's useful.
Please do, yeah.
So there's in the chat. It's kind of a potential look at what the near future could be as far as integrating a system that supports ecology and natural energy and community benefit and transportation, and really a system that uplifts all, and something I've always been inspired by.
Brilliant. I've also shared in the chat as well a couple of links. The first one is to where you can find kind of the suite of resources and information on the campaign. There's a useful crib sheet that kind of summarizes the main points, and then also the link to the petition itself. And then the second resource, the second link, sorry, takes you to the resources that give you everything you need to know basically to engage your MSP or MP on the campaign. And if you're looking for any more specific resources, do let me know. I don't want to interrupt if anyone has anything else to share. But as we're kind of looking towards what we might do with these contributions, on the next slide we have some kind of pointers. So we might use the contributions to start a conversation with your MSP or elected representative in your area. And again, the resources on our website have some really helpful, I think there's a parliamentary kind of briefing on there, as well as a guide to an event called Breaking Bread, which I'll speak a little bit about in a minute. And then you might also want to send us these. Oh, thanks, Ian, for sending those over. You might like also to send some contributions to our campaigns team. You can send them to our office in Edinburgh, which I can provide details of if anyone's looking for that, and we will add them to our national restoration pot, which I think will be going to Westminster at some point in the spring. Kind of need to confirm the specifics on that. And then we also have a template press release that churches can use as well to make a bit of noise locally about the campaign. On the next slide, yes, the next slide has some information just about, I suppose, more kind of widely our climate resources at Christian Aid. And the first one is really, really lovely. I only kind of discovered this recently, but it's called Climate Feelings. This is an all-age activity resource which delves into kind of some of the feelings, negative or positive, that we might be experiencing in light of the climate crisis. And it's a really powerful resource, particularly for congregations that are working with young people or children. That can be accessed on our website, I believe. And then Breaking Bread that I was mentioning is basically an event that you can run and invite your MSP along to. And it's worked really well. We've had a few in Scotland, and I think there was one in where was it? It was Bala, I believe, and the MP is actually really engaged with that church now, and what they're doing for with Christian Aid. So that's been a really fantastic resource. And then Creative for Climate Justice. So that is an arts resource that we have for kind of working with young people. It fits into the global citizenship part of the curriculum. And we recently had an event at Holyrood where the young people were presenting their artwork, and it was incredibly inspiring. And then, of course, closer to home, there's plenty of information on the Eco Congregations website as well. So I don't know if anyone has anything else to share or any questions. Please do. I'll do my best to answer them. But yeah, maybe we can open this time up for any thoughts or questions.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Obviously, Aidan can come off, share screen, and then we can kind of see each other. Thank you so much. I think, Elaine, did you have a question or something to share?
No, I was just going to share Janet Morley's Fair Trade prayer. It's a consumer's prayer, which I just think is, Sarah, you might be interested in this if you don't already know it. God of the just weight and the fair measure, let me remember the hands that harvested my food, my drink, not only in my prayers, but in the marketplace. let me not seek a bargain that leaves another hungry. I just think that's superbly put. So thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Has anyone else got any thoughts or questions for Lauren? Or anything that people would like to share that's happening in their own churches, or other resources that they might have used, or ways that they have responded to climate action, climate injustice. We know that COP's been happening, and there's been a few posts that I've put out on the Net Zero portal with some different prayer resources. I don't know if people have engaged with those or with other resources out there, or been following what's been going on there, but that's certainly something that's probably on all of our minds, that's happening. There was also the climate march in Glasgow last weekend. It was great to see pictures of that.
Bethany, I might take the opportunity as well to share the details of an event that we're running in February, and it's a similar format to the Net Zero online roadshow that we've had today. So it's the gathering, where we invite supporters and churches from across Scotland to join us. And so it's going to be on the 24th of February. And we'll be hearing from one of our partners in Kenya, and also some kind of inspiring stories from different churches across Scotland and how they've been getting involved with Christian Aid's work. So it's free to attend. It'll be recorded if folk aren't available to join but would like to watch afterwards. So I can just share the link to that in the chat.
Great, thank you so much, Lauren. And just
so I was just going to say, there was a Christian Aid event in September, which was chaired by Humza Yusuf, which was very interesting in putting forward the debt problems. And I think a recording of that's available.
Yes, if you're interested in the recording, I'll put my email address in the chat as well, and I can send it to anyone that would like to watch that back.
Yeah, many thanks to everyone who's adding different things into the chat. That's really helpful.
Can I ask?
And just to, carry on, Donald.
There's a link here to modern slavery, which is a kind of one of the, I mean, that happens in parallel, but also perhaps sometimes in response to the climate situation. I just wondered, and since that has become a much bigger issue nationally, I wonder if there is more emphasis can be put on that link as well.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, thanks for that, Donald.
Just a reminder as well that the recording of this Zoom will also go up on our Net Zero portal. So if anybody arrived a bit later on and would like to listen back to the beginning, you're welcome to, and feel free to share it as well with anyone who couldn't make it today. But yeah, I'd just like to say thank you again to Lauren for your input. That was really helpful, and really good to sort of take time just to reflect on the why of what we're doing, and put it into the context of the whole of the earth and the whole of God's creation and our faith. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today. And thank you all again for joining today. It's been really great to have different people's input, and to hear from you. Please remember, as we've said before, that our team are here to help and to support you in all that you're doing. So do have a look on the Net Zero portal, and there's a link in the chat to the contact page where you can get in touch with each member of the team if you've not reached out to us before. So yeah, please do get in touch and let us know if you'd like us to come and have a visit to your church. Craig was on the call earlier, and again, he was offering to come and do free surveys, as I know Adam, who's on the call now, would also be keen to do. So if you've got a church that might be interested in a new heating system and radiant heaters, then please do reach out to Craig or Adam, and they'd be really happy to come and have a look at your building. Because as we've also said already, you know, each building is different, each community is different, and every context is different. So we're here to help, and thank you so much for coming to the call today. We're going to move into a time of worship, and we're delighted that Valerie Cameron from the Provincial Environment Group is going to lead that for us. So over to you, Valerie. We'll get the slides up as well, so that we can end our time together in worship.
So thank you, everyone. We're going to close now with a short act of worship. Where the text is highlighted, please feel free to join in, although I would recommend that most of you keep your audio turned off, because we'll end up with 20 odd people saying the words together, and it will be a bit of a kerfuffle. So if one or two of you want to respond online, that'll be great, but please do try to join in if you can. So let us just take a moment to think of what we've been doing. Could you go back one slide, please? So we're gathering today in thanksgiving for the glorious gift of creation, and we ask for the Lord's help to care for our world. So let us say together, God of all creation, your spirit dances throughout the earth. You give drink to the trees, shade for the birds, bread for the hungry. You bring life and make all things holy. We pray for the lungs of the earth, the forests, the ice caps, and the oceans. Flood our hearts with your grace, so we may sow seeds of love, justice, and beauty, and reflect your kingdom here on earth. We ask this through your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Now, in his encyclical letter, Laudato Si', Pope Francis reflected on the cry of the earth. And Pope Francis said, "Each year sees the disappearance of thousands of plant and animal species, which we will never know. Our children will never see, because they have been lost forever. The great majority become extinct for reasons related to human activity. Because of us, thousands of species will no longer give glory to God by their very existence, nor convey their message to us. We have no such right. We recognise our part in harming the earth and our neighbours, and we ask for the Lord's forgiveness. With sincerity in our hearts, let us enter into a commitment to change our lives and to care for God's wonderful gift of creation." And we now have a gospel reading. So hear the word of our Lord according to St. Matthew. Glory to Christ our Saviour. That same day, Jesus left the house and sat by the lakeside. But such a large crowds gathered round him that he got into a boat and sat there. The people all stood on the shore, and he told them many things in parables. He put another parable before them. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it has grown, it is the biggest of shrubs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air can come and shelter in its branches. Give thanks to the Lord for his glorious gospel. Praise to Christ our Lord. A mustard seed, small enough to hold in the palm of your hand. Yet Jesus tells us that this precious little seed is like the kingdom of heaven. We ask the Lord our God to open our eyes to the wonders of creation, and we offer our hearts and prayers in hope that all things may flourish. So we say the responses together. God of newness, make of us a new creation. We pray for the church that she may bring healing to the earth and to people living in poverty. Sanctified by the love of God, may she guide us all on the path of wisdom. God of newness, make of us a new creation. We pray for world leaders, that the Lord may move them to act with respect and urgency for the sake of the earth and the most vulnerable. God of newness, make of us a new creation. We pray for all our sisters and brothers who are affected by the changing climate. May the Holy Spirit inspire communities to hold on to hope for the goodness of creation. God of newness, make of us a new creation. We pray for our local community, that we may sow just gestures of love and friendship for each other and the world around us, ever grateful for the gift God has entrusted to us. God of newness, make of us a new creation. We ask these prayers through the Lord our Lord Jesus Christ, Redeemer of all creation. Amen. And now an act of commitment for us all. We say together, I will allow my ears to listen to the cry of the earth, the voices of my sisters and brothers, those who face the harsh reality of climate change. I will allow my eyes to see the beauty of creation in flowers, creatures, forests and cities alike. I will allow my voice to speak out for justice and ensure people living in poverty are heard. I will allow my hands to care for the earth, to toil, to reap, to celebrate. I will allow my feet to take the path less trod, to walk the extra mile, and to take your message out to the world. And now our closing prayer. As COP30 comes to a close, we pray together the words of the prayer for the earth. So let us pray. Breath of life, from whom all order was created, the whole of creation bears witness to you. Teach us to respect all creatures. Increase our gratitude for your loving providence. Forgive us for our insensitivity and carelessness with the environment. Instigate us to fight for socio-environmental preservation and for the end of the climate crisis, taking care and working for the preservation of species and the maintenance of life on earth, as living proof of our conversion to the way of Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. And let us join together to conclude our worship by saying the grace. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all, now and forevermore. Amen.
Thank you so much, Val. And thanks again, everybody, for joining us today. And we hope that you have a good rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.